You were supposed to clear your mask. So I went down to about 30, 35 feet. And by the time I came up, I was like, wow, this really hurts. And I took my mask off and I popped all the corpuscles in my eyeballs. And so I had these red pools of blood for about 3 weeks. And I was like, I am never diving again. Then I realized somebody said, well, you know, you didn't really know what you were doing. Years later, I've been diving all over the world, including Plough, which is probably the most beautiful place that I've ever been, including Jellyfish Lake, which is a remarkable experience. But I'm in love with the sea. It is not what I get to do for a living, but it's what my passion is. I'm the CEO of Youth Service America. We are an umbrella organization that activates young people to find their voice, to take action, and to have an impact on the biggest problems facing the planet. We started age 5, which a mom told me the other day. She said, that's too late, you've already lost them. And I'm like, yeah, that's because you're Jewish and it starts in the womb. But I can't get them in the womb, so I have to wait till they get into elementary school. So we actually work with kids from K through 12 and higher ed in all 50 states, DC, and over 100 countries around the world. We are now using the Global Goals for Sustainability as our framework. And it is such a gift to us. One is that they called out, you know, goal 14, which is life under the sea. That's my favorite goal. And everyone should have a favorite goal, by the way. There'll be a test at the end of this. But the key thing about this is that we now have a framework. And as the protesters had their signs up a couple weeks ago, there is no planet B. Not plan B, planet B. But, you know, if we in fact achieve these goals by 2030, we will actually save this planet and we'll save ourselves. So we're activating young people to tackle these 17 big problems facing the planet. And the cool thing about it is that goal 14 is goal 14 in Miami, it's goal 14 in Mumbai, it's goal 14 in Manila, it's goal 14 in Marseille. So wherever you go in the world, it's the same agenda. We finally have a singular platform and a singular framework for solving problems. And we know what the indicators is, 169 indicators behind the 17 goals. So we're really, really excited about this idea. If you don't know about the global goals, go to globalgoals.org. You can read more about it. But with us at YSA, what we're doing is a major activation campaign starting September 1st. It's going to run through the school year. We're calling it Lead ASAP. And I only put goal 14 up there because that's my favorite, but there's 16 other goals that kids will be working on as well. And we want to activate 500,000 young people in 10,000 projects across the United States and DC over that period of time. We'll continue our overseas work as well, but this is, you know, a unique finite measurement that we want to do in the US, kind of in response to what's going on in the country right now and this need for renewal and the need for young people who didn't get a voice in the last election. So we want to focus on 5-year-olds to 18-year-olds who did not get to vote. And we want to give them a chance to be heard. And there is nothing more powerful and nothing shows that you matter more than through service. So 10,000 projects, we want to focus in particular and try to get at least 30% of those projects in youth and underserved communities. That means Title I schools, kids that are being left behind, kids that don't have an opportunity to be in after-school clubs, you know, to be in after-school programs, to play sports, because they have to go home and take care of their brother and sister, or their parents have to pay to play. In a lot of schools, that's what you have to do now for extracurricular activities. We're going to provide $1 million in grants, small micro grants that we're going to award to young people to underwrite their projects. And we want 100% of those projects to align to one of the 17 goals. So the name of the campaign is Lead ASAP. Would love to have you participate in it, have you be one of those 10,000 projects. We really need you, and the world needs you. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Bill Street. To answer Sean's question, I grew up in a little town called Rockton, Illinois. If you draw a line from every coastline in the United States, the center of the furthest away from an ocean is Rockton, Illinois, in the cornfields of northern Illinois. I was really lucky. My dad was a high school teacher for 35, 40 years, and during the summers we would go up to this lake in Wisconsin that you could barely find. It was on the boonies of Wisconsin. And I grew up on a boat, fishing and swimming and snorkeling around. And then my brother, who was older than I was, learned to scuba dive. And so when I turned 12 years old, he got me scuba diving lessons. And for those of you that are a little bit more my age, that was back in the days of the aqualung, the tube. Yeah, there you are. And back in those days, kids didn't scuba dive, and so I always, up in the lakes of Wisconsin, if the water's extremely cold, it's grayish and brown and green, and so you have to wear a wetsuit. But they didn't make wetsuits for kids, and I was a little kid, so I had to wear women's wetsuits. So they were always yellow, and they had pockets in places where boys don't have pockets. So I was always cold, and I was, all the equipment was really huge. And I would go down diving with my brother, and I would just sit at the bottom and just watch the fish. And I fell in love. I could tell you the behavior of northern pike and bluegill and perch. I could tell you where they hide. I could tell you the invasive milfoil that came into the lake, what year it came in, and how quickly it spread, because I spent as much time under the water as I probably did on the surface. And as I decided to go off to college, I got a biology degree, and I had an opportunity to work at the Shed Aquarium in Chicago. Is anybody from Chicago? One person. And I was an intern there, and as a benefit for doing a bunch of work, they let me dive in the Coral Reef Aquarium, which is an aquarium probably about the size of the stage. It's in the center of the aquarium. And that was my first saltwater dive. It was also my first warm water dive ever. And as you can imagine, I fell in love. And so I was able to go down and work at Shed Aquarium, or down at SeaWorld, went back to Shed Aquarium, opened the Long Beach Aquarium out in California, and then worked for the National Wildlife Federation. My responsibility is I look after all of the conservation and education efforts of SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment. We have literally hundreds of thousands of students that come to our parks each year, either as parts of school program visits, or we have residence facilities like dorm facilities at our parks where they come and spend an entire week with us, or they do sleepovers. I've spent more nights sleeping on the floors of SeaWorld than anybody ever should. And the intent of all of these programs is to inspire people to change their behavior, to learn more about the oceans, and hopefully eventually to advocate for them. I was in a meeting with our top executives, Sean, what was it, 3 years ago? And we were talking about the changes that were happening at SeaWorld, and many of the people at that you're my age, they're a little bit older, and they were talking about what they thought youth wanted. And as I sat there and listened to them, I realized a couple things. One, they had no idea what they were talking about. And two, none of those people that they were talking about were represented at all around that table. And so I walked out of there both enlightened and slightly depressed, because I felt it was my responsibility to figure out a way that our company could better relate to younger audiences. And so a few weeks later, I saw Sean. I said, Sean, this is what I want to do. And we conceived this Youth Advisory Council. And basically, we went and did almost a nationwide search for a diverse group of young adults that had a wide variety of different perspectives. People that loved SeaWorld, people that didn't like SeaWorld, people that grew up on the coast, people that lived in the Midwest. And we brought them together, and we just gave them a voice. We said, what do you think we should do? And we did a bunch of exercises, and they came back with the most amazing ideas, the most insightful philosophies about the kind of company we should be. And then they sat there in front of all of our senior leadership and just started telling them the way that we should operate as a company. And although it sounds really simple, it was amazing how much that information started to change the way our company thought. And so I end with that story just saying that this is my first time I've been to this conference, and I'm inspired because really the changes that are going to happen, whether you're in the for-profit corporate world or the non-profit world or you're with a service agency, are really going to come from the young people that are in this audience. You're going to be able to shape the way that companies and organizations should operate in the future. And so I'm excited to talk a little bit more about how we engage youth in companies and organizations.
Thank you all. So I'm going to come over and join you guys too. So as you can see, we have a really fantastic group of SeaWorld here today, and everyone brings such diverse perspectives and experiences, but really united by that common passion, that common theme of we can no longer write off young people as leaders of the future. It's imperative that, especially with the problems facing our ocean, we really need to engage young people as leaders today, really taking on these challenges head on and working in a collaborative effort with all of us. And it was great to hear these stories of the personal connections to water and the ocean, and these experiences that prompted the interest here, and also from our young people. I think I noted in everyone's comments, the support that people like all of you have provided to them to really elevate and amplify and grow the work that they're passionate about. And so that's what we're going to dive into next, a little bit more of those kind of best practices and what all of you can do to help us, create hundreds of people like you see right here on the stage, and you see the young people here with us in this room today. So the first question we're going to dive into is really directed at our 4 young people up here, at our students. And what I want to know is, what are some of the challenges that you face as a young person getting involved in ocean conservation work at an early age? And how is support from mentors like the people in this room from the ocean conservation community? You guys already mentioned some of those. How have they helped you overcome those challenges? Kimberly, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. So one of the challenges the Plastic-Free Mermaids faces is trying to get the community to participate in our cleanup. So I'm not talking about like Plastic-Free Mermaids members or people that are aware of negative impacts on the ocean, but more of the community that they are unaware or they don't believe that the impact on the ocean affects them. So we try to, so the second challenge we have is that we also try to convince politicians to pass existing resolutions to end plastic pollution. So the mentors that have helped us through this is Catherine Uden from the Surfrider Foundation. She has allowed us to collaborate with her and host interactive cleanups like paddleboarding, snorkeling, kayaking, and which engages any community because they want to be part of the ocean. They don't want to be, picking up trash along the coastals and feeling like it's manual labor. And then also Debris Free Oceans, Tracy, she takes us to the Keys, and we pick up, like last cleanup we picked up over 200 pounds of just plastic debris, and then we went snorkeling afterwards, and we saw a bunch of sharks, reef sharks, nurse sharks, and so it's more just seeing the ocean for yourself and a more personal experience. And then also Catherine Uden, she comes with us during our local commissioner meetings, and she helps us give additional support to try to end plastic pollution, so the commissioners can see that there's an ocean conservation community and group, that it doesn't not only have one voice but multiple.
Excellent. Thanks, Kimberly. And kind of going up that, Seth, we're just go down the line here, but Seth, you are the youngest person on our panel at 13, correct?
Yes.
Excellent. So as you guys see, and I think Steve can touch on this too with the 5-year-old comment, but we see this push as younger and younger people getting involved and having support again from people like you, and I'm really excited to hear how that's benefited you as well.
Thank you. I think Heirs to Our Ocean's biggest challenge is being taken seriously. Personally, I went to a conference, Whale Fest, in Monterey, California, and I was sitting at this talk, and they asked this question about noise pollution because I noticed that they were using low-frequency sonar. And after the guy answered my question, he basically just shooed me off and ignored me for the rest of the show. That was annoying because the fact that he gave back is that he uses high-frequency sonar, which doesn't affect marine animals, which is incorrect. High-frequency sonar affects belugas and other types of marine animals. So personally, that is how I've been affected. But Heirs-wise, support from mentors. Well, each Heir has a mentor or multiple mentors that helps guide them. For example, mine is Michael Stalker. Michael Stalker is the CEO and founder and executive director of Ocean Conservation Research. He is amazing. He does so much great work, and I am so lucky to have him. Thank you.
Great. Nora, do you want to jump in? And I want to say, just jump in real quick here. So many of the mentors of this group and of other students are in here. Can we just give a big round of applause to the parents, teachers, mentors, educators here? Thank you all.
One of the challenges is actually similar to some of your challenges is getting adults or people in higher positions to be aware of the projects that we're doing, and because we're youth, sometimes we aren't taken seriously even though we're doing things that are very important and that are spreading messages to other people. So that's been one of the problems that the Aquarium on Wheels program has faced. And actually recently, one of my mentors, the person who leads the program, Miss Maria,
connected us with some of the media and other teams that are in very high positions in the aquarium to spread a message and create a label or a brand for the program, so more people know about it and more people can get involved and come to our plays or fund the program or do anything that they can to help and support us, because we're doing some really great things.
Great, thanks, Nora. And I think we'll touch on this probably too with Bill and Steve in just a moment, but I think that really speaks to a good point when we talk about as organizations start to bring young people to the table, it tends to maybe fall in one bucket or another, maybe the education side of things, the conservation side of things, and really, we talk about the need for young people in our organizations and our work, we need it really across the board. So I think it's so important to see places like the National Aquarium and others really making those connections throughout the entire organization and bringing young people to the table, not just in one space, but really across the board. David?
Similar to everyone else, I've also experienced problems with being taken seriously. And this kind of goes along with some other things I've had trouble with. If I'm trying to reach out to an organization to make a contact, for example, with Ocean Steward, I reach out to organizations because I want to promote them and create a place where people can find things that they're interested in. Oh, this organization focuses on this, that's what I want to get interested in. So I'm trying to create this place people can decide this is where I want to go with this. And I'm trying to reach out to organizations and I never get a reply. Or they don't acknowledge me, or it's just, oh, it's just some kid, okay, it's not that big of a deal. And this is really frustrating. I'm trying to make this great resource for people to use, and I can't promote them, which is something that's helpful for them as well. And a way to combat this is just be responsive. That's the biggest thing. I know Sailors from the Sea, I emailed them once, and I said, this is who I am, this is what I do. I would love to help and work with you in any way. And this was before I did Ocean Steward. I called them and had a phone call, and within the time of a phone call, I was already helping them immediately. They were one of the most responsive organizations I've ever worked with. And just, you have to be willing to accept the youth perspective, realize we might have different ideas, and we might tackle them in a different way, but we want to help. And if you can just help us out and allow us to provide our perspective, that's the most helpful thing, and realize that we treat us as equals. I think that's something that may not be easy to do, but it's really helpful for us when we want to help you out.
Great, thanks so much, Damon. I think that's a perfect segue now to really just turn it over to Bill and Steve as two organizations who've really gone full throttle at saying yes to young people and bringing young people in as equal collaborators in the work that we do. So, Bill, if you want to start us off, I'm curious, given your experience bringing young people into leadership roles in the ocean conservation field, what advice do you have to this room or other organizations that are really wishing to engage and support young people in this field?
I think one of the things, especially companies, to do is listen with humility. I think every one of you said getting taken seriously, I think I just recently did a presentation with all the directors at zoos and aquariums in the country, and we were talking about the Youth Advisory Council, and Sean was there, and I told them if they didn't have a Youth Advisory Council already, they were already behind. Because the reality is that our younger generations have an incredibly strong voice, and they are shaping cultural perceptions about zoos and aquariums, about everything, politics, everything. And so wise companies need to listen with humility and to really take what they're hearing to heart. The other challenge I think that we all face is that when I grew up, if you didn't know something, you went to the encyclopedia or you went to the library card catalog and looked up a book, and then somewhere along the way somebody invented this internet thing, and you guys can Google everything that you want to know. And so the access to information today is almost limitless. But the challenge is how do you help, especially young people, navigate through the copious amounts of information to knowledge, the stuff that's actually accurate, the stuff that is meaningful. And so I think that's another thing that companies have to start thinking about is how do we steward the ability to help everybody, but especially young people, disseminate out what's the most important information and what's the noise. Because that's really tough. I think everybody, I don't know about you guys, but just today on my BlackBerry, or I shouldn't say Blackberries because it's really old school, but whatever that thing is, I got 150 emails just during this conference today. That's unreasonable to understand how to communicate back. So part of my job is filtering out the noise and the stuff that really needs to get attention. And so I think companies can help with that as well. You have to really listen with that humility, and you also have to develop opportunities to sort through all that information and identify the Seths and the Noras and the Amy's out there to say, here are the types of programs we want to get involved with. Great, thanks. Steve?
I would just remind the young people in the room to look at history. Look at places, where women, where African Americans, where gays and lesbians, where Latinos, where people with disabilities, they have all had to fight to have their voices heard. It's not easy. It is not easy. And what we've learned is that you've got to show up. If you had told me 20 years ago when I started this job that my biggest challenge, or if you asked me what my biggest challenge was, I probably would have said apathetic kids. I would have said, well, my job is to get them off their butts and get them to go out and save the planet. That is not a problem at all. Young people are volunteering at record rates today, more than any generation in history. My problem is adults. It is seriously adults. And so what we work at is to try to bring young people to the table. I've got 4 young people on my board. They vote on my salary. I'm very nice to them. Sean used to be one of them. That's why I'm saying I do whatever Sean tells me. But there's a great expression that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, right? And so we have tried to invent ways for young people to be taken more seriously. One is that we say, a young person who's idealistic is great, but a young person who's idealistic and has data is powerful. So collecting data, being smart, as you were saying about, what is some of the information that I could bring to educate adults that will wake them up to the issue. Don't just go in and go, I love the oceans and I want you to help me. Go in with a very specific set, as all of you have articulated along here, very specific set of the problem that you want to solve and why it's a problem, and then what your solutions are and why you need help. I would also partner with adults. Your advantage over us as young people is you actually like your parents. I mean, that was that old, when I was growing up, it was like, don't trust anybody over 30. Today, it's like no kid does anything without their family, their parents, their youth-adult partnerships, that kind of thing. So don't be afraid to partner with adults. Ask adults. I mean, I get calls at all hours of the night by kids who want help on stuff. That's my job, right? But ask an adult to help you, to get you in the room. The other cool thing that we did was, I'll give you an example, we created these conversation cafes that were led by young people. They were 8th graders. How old are you in 8th grade? Like 13? Yeah. Think about 13. So these were all 8th graders, and we did one in Colorado, and this was about a uranium mine that was being put into the community. And the 8th graders led the discussion, and they invited the company that wanted to dig this mine, and they brought the mayor in, and they brought all of these players into the table, and they put them around. They had this conversation cafe. And the head of the union goes, this mine is going to bring in 400 jobs to this town. And you start arguing about jobs, and it shuts everybody down. And the 8th grade boy raised his hand and he goes, well, that's true, sir, except only 68 of them are permanent. And the guy blushed and didn't know what to say, right? But the young person had their data, they had their information, they knew what they were talking about. So creating environments, don't just go to their forum, create your own forum where you bring in your own power players and bring them in. Then they can't shut you down. Then they can't ignore your question because you're actually at the table.
Great, thank you both so much. And again, kind of both those comments really mesh well together with one from the organizational leadership perspective, with Bill's comments on really listening. It's, so to all the organizations in this room, really challenge all of you to look at opportunities to bring young people into the table. And then at the same time, when you're building programs, look at how we talked about this really starting at the beginning of the day today, how we can, as organizations, provide the data, the science, I know even from the plastic panels, the discussions we've been having, how we can really arm young people with those tools so they're better equipped when they leave our organizations and go out into the broader community as well. So bouncing really off that, turning back to our students now, in my work, and I think all of our work, we've constantly seen organizations, especially in the conservation field, really looking to engage young people and bring them on board, as has been evidenced by this conference and so many other events. And I'm curious, to our young people who've had the support and mentors and organizations to plug into, what advice do you have to the organizations in this room to better reach out to your generation, to better engage with you. Again, amazing groups already assembled here today, but how can we really take it to the next level? Danny, you want to say?
Absolutely. So in reaching out, I still think it's kind of been said before, but you really need a youth voice within your organization, your company, whatever it may be. They're going to know what the new way is, the new social media platform, the new who knows what. So you reach out and get young people's attention. I really think that having, whether it be you have a volunteer position, you have, every now and again you can check in with them, whether it be a council of 15 people, whether it be a permanent position, whatever you choose for it to be, I think that's the crucial way to have a youth perspective. You can think, okay, I think this is what my child is using, or I think I heard something about this, but there's really going to be no better way to figure out how to reach them. And then not only that, when you include people into your organization, you're going to create a whole new network, because they're going to have all their people who are have the same interests, want to help the ocean, want to be help in the conservation field. Then you're going to have a whole field of them to also help spread your organization's message. Having the youth voice within is, I think, crucial.
Great, thanks, Danny. Nora, what advice do you have for the organization?
I think some of the advice, I'm going to go off of something that we discuss really regularly in the Youth Advisory Council that I'm on, is making sure that you're transparent, or that your message and what you do as an organization is really clearly delivered to you, because that's something that we really want, is for you to be clear and deliberate about what it is that you do and then what it is that you want from us. So I think that's something really big that organizations can do. And also just making sure, this is discussed already, that you treat us like our thoughts and that our opinions are valid, and I guess like adults, because a big deal for kids is being treated like you're an adult, and like the things you have to say are important. So those are some advice that I would have.
Great, thanks, Nora. And really, just real quick, combining those two comments here to the organizations, don't be afraid, I think, to turn the reins over to young people to help build some of that transparency in organizations. So sometimes there may be, some things that you're not comfortable with, but, kind of push yourself outside of that comfort zone and, turn your social media over to a young person, or allow them to create some of that content for you, or some of those programs, and really give it to them, and you'll be, I think, really amazed at what they come up with. Seth?
I think the most important thing to do is not treat young people like a pawn. I think that you need to respect their decision, and even if you don't like the youth perspective, you still need to respect it. So what I'm saying here is that respect our decision, because we're the future of this planet. So just don't treat us like a pawn, and we're the next generation. So yeah.
Kimberly?
Okay, so since the Plastic-Free Mermaids is pretty much run by youth, I think the best way to target youth would be through social media. Most use is probably Instagram and Twitter, and we, like the Plastic-Free Mermaids, we post about like our exciting cleanups, our interactive activities, and the youth, our generation, we want to use the energy we have and the effort to conserve the ocean, and so probably the best strategy to target us and to portray your message is through social media.
Great, thanks everyone. I think, one of the things we talk about when we have these kind of panels a lot of times is what, young people bring to the table. And so often we hear that the access to information and the energy and the innovative ideas. And it's really, I think, powerful to couple that with the, the knowledge base, the resources, the access that kind of the adult world has as well. And again, merge that together. That, Steve mentioned youth-adult partnerships, I think is really the key that comes out of the discussion, is we really need everyone at the table as well. I know some people came in just to update you kind of where we are in this panel. We've got a couple last questions to wrap up with this group, and then we want to turn it over to the audience for some Q&A and bring you into this discussion as well. But shifting gears a little bit, it's hard to ignore, I think, from the get-go when we started this morning, as we come together in DC, in our nation's capital, I think we're constantly reminded of the impact that elections and the political process really has on the future health of our ocean. And so I'm curious for all of our panelists, how can young people really mobilize and make an immediate impact in this area, in this policy area, regardless of their age, even especially if they're not old enough to vote? Danny, you want to start? We'll go down.
Absolutely. We talked a little bit about resources throughout this. I believe just having resources and education available to youth to participate in opportunities like this summit. For me, this is my first real introduction to policy and politics with the conservation field. I've always been involved with the science and right on the ground, like let's go pick up that trash or whatever it may be, but I've never been exposed to this. This is my first true experience and I'm very excited to be here and I've already learned so much. So providing opportunities to come to summits like this, maybe it's a local thing. If you are a local organization hosting an information session or having a day where you come get involved, here's what you can do right here in your own town. This is how we can get you involved. And then you can use that and expand it if you're a larger organization. Maybe online resources. I've been very interested in this, but never really knew how I could get involved with it until I found out about this. And this is an incredible opportunity. If you can provide resources for, if you have youth in your organization, allow them to come to something like this. Create something like this within your organization, in your own town. I think hands-on education and having the resources to do so is really a helpful way to get an introduction to policy and make a difference immediately.
Great, thanks, Seth.
I think that with the change in policy and administration, it's brought a lot of like-minded people together, and those people are starting their own organizations. So, like you said, getting involved with either organizations that are already existing or creating your own is something big that youth can do, and even going in and meeting the people that are representing you and letting them know that you think these issues are important is something huge that you can do, because they might not see a 15-year-old kid that thinks, plastic or foam is damaging the fox in the marsh down the street from them. It makes a difference seeing someone's face and hearing their voices, and especially if they're young. I know from experience it really changes sometimes what people do and what people perceive. And even if you are going and doing something else physically, is going in peacefully protesting or going out and creating, like I said, your own organization and being a part of the community, because that's going to make a huge difference.
I would just say get the word out and talk to your representatives. For example, Heirs to Our Oceans has an heir. Her name's Miel. She's in Palau, and she has gotten her school to go completely plastic free. It's amazing what she's done. She's also has a bill that has been signed by legislators. We're hoping it becomes a law to have no more plastic in Palau. She is amazing. And so, like I said earlier, just get the word out. Do whatever you can. Do everything you can.
I think the most immediate and effective impact would be trying to combine communities with different ethnic groups or different opinions, and then trying to collaborate their resources and the networks they need, and then breaking them down, and then prioritizing them individually so you can have a more effective movement, and then tackle them to the most effective way.
Steve?
Yeah, I would just say democracy is not a spectator sport. And young people today have more power in this thing than Bill Clinton had on his desk when he left the White House. You have more ability to reach out and to affect the world. But you have to vote too. I've had a lot of young people come up to me and say, yeah, but I volunteer, Steve, I volunteer. And I go, you've got to vote. You have to vote. Elections matter. If we've learned anything, elections matter. And that's at the local level, it's at the state level, and it's at the national level. And those people who decide to sit out and be spectators are really, I think, going to regret the fact that they did not participate in the electoral process. So I think this idea that young people, want to be on the field. They want to be agents of change. They don't want to have things done to them. They want to be the doers. They want to be the actors, not the recipients. It's much more fun to be on the giving end of the power stick than on the receiving end, right? But with that, as I said, comes that obligation to vote and to make sure at the end of the day it is public policy that affects us more than anything else. You know, many times, you know, actions that people take in the communities help in the short term, but the long-term health and the sustainability of programs are really built around that. We use a model, and you saw the name of our campaign is called Lead ASAP. Everyone knows ASAP means now. That we don't look at young people as the future, we look at them as the present. We can't afford for them to grow up before they start changing the planet. But it also means the 4 buckets of where kids actually can affect change. So the A in ASAP is about awareness. And it turns out young people are powerful forces on raising awareness about big issues. If you think about littering, recycling, smoking, seatbelt use, that was all driven by kids who learned about these things in school and then brought them home to their families and said, Dad, there's 32 poisons in a cigarette, you've got to stop smoking. Mom, we need to recycle. Dad, you've got to wear your seatbelt. All of those things driven by young people. The S in ASAP, so that's awareness. The S is that direct service where kids clean a beach or they plant trees or they tutor another child, they collect food. It's the sort of blood, sweat, and tears time that they put into it. The second A in ASAP is about advocacy. We had 3rd graders in Texas. They learned about hunger, and they were shocked to find out, how old are you in 3rd grade? Like 11, I think. 9 years old. They learned about hunger, and they learned that 1 out of 5 kids in Texas goes to bed hungry in the richest country in the history of the world. They were shocked. So what did they do? They used our grant, and they bought t-shirts, and they marched on the State House. 9 years old. And their state legislator came out and said, what are you doing? And they said, we're really angry about this. And he said, well, let's sit down and talk about it. So they went inside his office, and he said, let's come up with a solution. And they created the Texas Breakfast Bill, which guarantees that every kid in Texas gets breakfast when they come to school in the morning, rich or poor. Don't tell me 9-year-olds can't change the world. They sat up in the gallery and watched their bill be voted on. So that's advocacy. That's the A, where you work with your mayor, you work on boards, you know, you advocate for public policy change. And then the P in ASAP, we all know that. It's philanthropy, right? Because sometimes it just takes money. My cousin goes to Penn State. They just had their big dance-a-thon. They call it the thon there. They raised $12.5 million for pediatric cancer, dancing, over 1 weekend. $12.5 million. So awareness, service, advocacy, philanthropy, these are the tools of your generation. Plus this, you know, electronic stuff that adults still are confused about, which gives you an advantage. And you ought to be able to just whoop right by them.
What Steve said.
All right.
You know, one of the I think what all of you touched on was redefining youth activism, youth advocacy. I know we talk a lot about that in terms of, one, is it morally and ethically correct to engage youth in advocacy and activism types of efforts? But the reality is that's not a question I probably should be having to answer for myself. That's you guys leading that process. You guys organizing, you guys becoming advocates and activists. I can say the trend is that we adults are going to listen more and more to young people about their issues, what's important to them. You guys have huge impacts, but it's going to be up to you to organize that advocacy and activism effort. If you're waiting for us to do it, I mean, that's a great program, but if you're waiting for us to do it, you're going to be waiting. But it's programs like this, it's programs where you're able to talk to your legislators and get people involved and engaged, and you're leading the process as young people. That's what's going to have the wave of success. It's not going to be us old folks here trying to put things together. We can help, but it's going to be up to you guys to redefine what it is to be a youth activist.
Great. Thank you all so much for that perspective. Hopefully that's helpful to our organizations and our young people as we get ready for Capitol Hill Day and really taking this conference forward, making sure it doesn't end right here this week. Real quick, I know we're coming toward the end of our time, but I want to run down the panel, maybe 10, 15 seconds each. When we look at the state of Earth, we look at the challenges facing our marine ecosystems, what continues to drive each of you? What continues to give you hope for the future of our planet? 10, 15 seconds. What do you guys got?
Okay, so really quickly, just in my lifetime, I've already seen the idea and the concept of ocean conservation become more prevalent. No, it's something we actually talk about in society. It's something that people actually are starting to care about. It's being heard across generations, across cultures, across nations. people are actually starting to talk about this, and that gives me hope that it's not just something this small group of people genuinely cares about. This is true, but more people are learning about it, and as more people learn about it, more people are going to care about it.
I think what really makes me hopeful and passionate about it is seeing other youth involved, because like was previously said, we are the present and the future, and seeing those who are going to be a part of this in the future really makes me excited to go forward and to keep moving with my conservation activities and with all the work that I do.
What makes me hopeful is that amazing mentors like Dr. Sylvia Earle are passing the torch down to our generation very fluidly, and also to see other ocean conservation kid-based organizations with us standing for this fight. That's what makes me hopeful.
My drive keeps going because as trying to end plastic pollution, and the consumption of it is watching an individual's lifestyle change. Watching them become unaware of plastic to becoming aware of their negative effects. Seeing them use a straw every day in a bag, every day in the grocery stores to not using them at all, and then spreading the word and telling everyone else not to use them. It's like a small part of plastic pollution is eliminated because not necessarily the manufacturing of plastic, but more of the consumption of it. So it makes a small difference.
In September of 2015, just about a year and a half ago, 193 countries agreed to the same 17 goals that are needed to save the planet. 193 countries never agree on anything. So the fact that they were able to come together and to do the spade work and to go out and reach out, they did a lot of pre-interviews to figure out what these 17 big, hairy goals are. And the fact that they came up and they finally came up with that agreement of these 17, I think are extraordinary. And the fact that goal 14 is front and center as life under the sea, as one of the fundamental pieces of saving the planet, I think is extraordinary news. It's a tool. It's something that we can all use. And I challenge the young people in this room to hold the adults and the leaders in their communities, whether it's the mayor, whether it's the senator, whether it's the member of Congress, or whether it's the President of the United States, hold them to those goals. Ask them what kind of progress we're making on them, because our signature is on it as a country, as is every other country, and I think we all have an obligation to make sure that those goals get achieved by 2030.
So I came across a scientist that was really interested in sea turtles, and in particular, sea turtles get these growths on their bodies, these tumors called fibropapillomas, and often it's horrific in terms of disfiguring their body and not allowing them to swim. And so this female scientist decided that she wanted to figure out a way it's viral, and could we fix this in sea turtles? And noticed that alligators, which are somewhat of a close relative of sea turtles, don't get fibropapillomas, and started doing genetic research to figure out what the alligators have that sea turtles don't have, and can we figure out what that is, and can we put that into the sea turtles and keep them from getting fibropapillomas? That's pretty cool stuff. She's 16. Madison. That's what makes me excited about this generation. I have veterinarians, we have top scientists all over the world that have looked at fibropapillomas, and I have a 16-year-old in Florida that's trying to figure it out. That's the impact that you guys have. And it wasn't because she came across necessarily an adult or a leader. She just got inspired by some teacher or somebody, or just swimming in the ocean, and she's going to make a huge difference in the world.
Great, thank you all. So let's give them a round of applause.